I'm here to ask you a big question. What's the next chapter in your life? Maybe you've been thinking about going to school for photography, filmmaking, or design. Maybe you're on your third or fourth career already and you can't imagine sitting in a classroom again. Well, it's no real big surprise because we now live in the age of the lifelong learner. If the sound of being a lifelong learner scares you, well, keep your ears where they are, artists, because we've got the likes of Annie Leibovitz teaching photography and Scorsese teaching filmmaking to anybody with $100 US. It's a wonderful time to be alive. Hello everybody and welcome back to this thing I call Chosen Idea. My name is Marco. I'm a creative generalist, and all that means is I've been lucky enough to get paid to do a bunch of creative stuff throughout my career. I've learned a few things along the way, and now it's my chance to share those things with you guys. This topic is something that's been covered by some of my favorite YouTubers out there. I aim to bring it to you from a different perspective because not only do I have a formal education in some of the stuff that I teach on YouTube, but I've also been a formal educator. I'm not saying I'm necessarily better at teaching this stuff or better at the stuff that I'm teaching because of a formal education or being a formal educator in the past, but just a different perspective because there's some really talented people teaching this stuff on YouTube. I've learned a lot from them. As some of you know from my summary episode, I was a college teacher at one point, so if you're thinking maybe I may be a little bit biased on this topic because of that fact, please hold your preconceptions because the 2 weeks prior to my teaching position, I needed a serious refresher in a lot of the stuff that I hadn't been working with for a while and that I'd be teaching at the school. And at the time, there was a new girl on the block and her name was Linda. That's right, lynda.com. I actually did a bunch of lynda.com courses just as a refresher, primarily for the software that I was going to be teaching at the college. A lot of the theory and things like that are somewhat burned into my head, so I didn't need any refreshers for that stuff. I was super nervous my first day teaching at the school. I was actually a nervous wreck my first day teaching at the school. But once I realized that I pretty much knew my stuff inside and out and that my love for telling stories was going to help a lot, everything that I'd learned throughout the years just flowed out of me like a tap. I started to enjoy teaching. I had somewhat of a revelation while I was teaching at the school, and I don't think it's something that you'd find in any educational statistics, but it's something that I want to share with you guys today. During my short time teaching, there was only a handful of students that I had encountered that I would have felt confident hiring myself as a hiring manager. Maybe about 10% of them, but that 10% went on to do things in their career that I could have only dreamt of for my own career. Now, one of the most important things I learned as a teacher was what made that 10% different from the other 90% of students. The other most valuable thing I learned was the value of online learning. That 2-week period before becoming a teacher really hammered home the fact that a motivated learner could do really well learning online. And that 10% of students that I was talking about would have fell into that group of motivated learners. Now, being a successful creative person is not unlike being a successful teacher. It requires some long unpaid hours and a passion for what you're doing to get you through those hours. The school made it difficult for me to maintain that passion. I felt bad for the students that I had who worked very hard to pass my class when the administration at the school decided that it'd be best for business to award a diploma to everybody, regardless of whether they passed my class or not. Naturally, many of you out there are watching this and have no intention of making any of this stuff your career. You've just got some personal reasons for learning something, for your own enjoyment, a hobby, whatever. And that's fantastic. But I know some of you out there may actually have the intention of going into one of these areas as a career. So before I continue on this topic of formal versus online education, I just want to get something out of the way first. Now, when I was in high school, so like a million years ago, I had this guidance counselor named Mr. Zedkowski. Dead ringer for Henry Kissinger, by the way. And he shows me this book with all these careers listed in it. And beside them was the income potential for each of those careers. And beside graphic designer, it said unlimited. So, of course, as a high school student, I'm super impressed by this. I already knew I wanted to go into the arts, but that was just because I wanted to make cool looking stuff. So when I saw that there was this unlimited income potential being a graphic designer, hey, that doesn't sound like too bad a deal to me. Now, if it had said singer-songwriter in the book beside it, it would have said unlimited as well. So my point is that if you're going into the arts and your motivation is financial or getting rich, you might want to rethink that, because it's not that you can't make an unlimited income or a ton of money in one of the creative fields. It's just that when you look at those people who are successful in those areas, or those people who are wildly successful in those areas especially, you'll see that the motivation is rarely financial or getting rich. It's typically because there's a passion, a love. It comes from a place like that, not from a financial motivation or from the motivation to be rich. The hiring of creatives has changed a lot over time, and I'm talking centuries. You'd apprentice with a master in hopes that one day you'd become a master, and then you'd have your own clients or commissions or what have you. Then there was a short misguided period where people were actually looking at a paper that said you knew what you were doing. And then up until the present day, where your work basically tells a potential employer everything they want to know. A lot of students are doing freelance stuff on the side, which is great, because then they do have a small collection of clients that they've actually done work for, which is obviously a little bit more valuable than just having their student work. Now, the quality of that work is paramount in getting you your job. And nowadays, a diploma or degree really means very little when it comes to getting a job. I can't tell you when the last time is that an employer has looked at what school or diploma I have. And you're only really as good as your last job. The reality is that someone can come from an amazing school and their work is crap, and vice versa. Okay, I feel like I've got to give you a little bit more background, so please indulge me in a little bit of a walk down memory lane. In September of 1989, yeah, it's a very long time ago, I was a high school senior, and I just started a co-op position at a print shop as an artist's assistant. That artist was a guy named Tim Norton. Super guy who wasn't about taking advantage of anybody, and he stuck me in front of a computer called a Mac II-Ci. This was Apple's newest offering, at a 25 megahertz monster, and he told me, Marco, forget about everything I showed you last week. This is the future. Spend as much time as you can in front of this thing. Well, I think I discovered what love was when Tim stuck me in front of that machine in all its beige glory. Anyway, I was like a veritable sponge in front of that thing, soaking up every little bit of knowledge I possibly could. Because of my high school co-op program and Tim, by the time I got into design school, I had already spent more professional hours in front of a Mac than my instructors did at the school. As a result, my last semester of computer class I was exempt from, and I also got the opportunity to help teach my fellow classmates, which was the first time I ever taught software. After graduating from design school, I took an additional, more advanced class in Photoshop, and then I took out a business loan. I was able to take out a business loan because of my incredibly supportive parents, who not only co-signed my business loan, but they also paid for design school. So what did I do with the business loan? Well, my dad and I jumped into a car, drove for 5 hours to the closest place that sold the software that I needed, and then I promptly went and bought my own Merlin. What's a Merlin, you ask? Merlin was a code name for the Mac II-Ci, and that's how I felt like, an all-powerful wizard, ready to do some sorcery with my 25 megahertz of power. I did end up spending some of the business loan on 3D software, because even before I went to design school, I had a really strong interest in 3D computer graphics and 3D computer animation. I did see this whole multimedia thing happening that people started talking about, and I figured it could only help to know this 3D stuff. So I pretty much spent every waking moment that I wasn't working on paying back the business loan on learning 3D through books. Really expensive books, because the whole online learning thing hadn't started yet. Where am I going with all this? Well, that 10% that killed it in my class, they killed it because they wanted to learn and they wanted to learn bad. They had a fire in them that wasn't going to be happy until it was done consuming everything I had to say, the other teachers at the school, and anything they could learn outside the class. That passion that they had and the work ethic aren't exclusive of one another. They had something within themselves that you can't teach in a classroom. Perhaps a good teacher can fan the flames a little bit, but my humility has me reluctant to take any credit in that department. One of the most common criticisms people get when they decide that they want to go into the arts professionally is, isn't that kind of an over-competitive field? Aren't there photographers, illustrators, filmmakers being born every day? Well, yeah, of course. But the reality is you're really only competing with that 10%. The trick is, you've got to be one of those 10%. I do know how much everybody likes their lists, so let's do a quick pros and cons between formal classroom education and online learning. Feel free to give it a pause here if you want to read through these. A couple of standouts here are number 6 in the formal classroom category. It can be a really valuable thing to have a teacher or school put you in touch with an employer ready to hire people right out of school. A game changer in the online learning side, also number 6, and that's for people with mobility issues or other special needs that may make learning online a huge benefit. So deceptively, these pros and cons lists net out at about the same length. I say deceptively because these individual points may be more important to some than others, and it all depends on the individual. That means, do you have a family or not? Is your motivation personal enjoyment, or is it professional? There's also, of course, financial considerations and all of that. One of the faculty members confided in me one day that one of his greatest fears was, after for so many years doing what he loved for a living, that eventually he would grow sick of it or start to hate it. I felt that in my own career, whenever that started to happen, the best thing that I could do was to step back and sort of remember the things that made me fall in love with what I was doing in the first place. Remember, there's always a ton of people out there trying to make a go of what you're interested in right now. But if you're one of those 10% that I had mentioned, you don't have to worry about 90% of those people. So until next time, keep working hard to make your chosen idea a reality. And until then, take care. Peace. I imagine some of you have been wondering why I haven't been outside to shoot any episodes lately, and it's just that it's been so cold in Toronto lately. But I assure you, once it warms up out there, I'm going to take us all back out there to shoot more episodes. Wow, if it gets colder this winter, I'm going to have to start wearing pants again when I do these videos.